Welcome to IVRPA's fifth webinar of 2025. My name is Scott Whitty. I have the honor of serving as IVRPA's president, along with an exceptional dedicated board of directors, three of whom you are seeing today. IVRPA, the International VR Professionals Association, is the only international association dedicated to helping our members and the wider VR XR community of creatives be more successful. These webinars are an example of that and present content that can be difficult to find elsewhere. Today's webinar is in response to requests for more basic how-to guidance. You will get that, but also will give seasoned professionals ideas of how they can be more productive. You will see different techniques developed by different individuals. We are not saying that these are the best methods, but they work for us. You may have better ideas, and I hope you will share them with all of us during the Q&A session at the end. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to paid members on the IVRPA website, along with all past webinars and future webinars when they come up. If you aren't currently a member, I encourage you to join IVRPA. It really is a great value. There will be a Q&A session at the end. You can ask questions using the chat or the Q&A function. I would suggest the chat. You can also click the raise hand button next to your name in the participants dialogue, and then we'll recognize you and you can actually speak in the presentation. When you are writing something in chat, be sure to click the blue Send to drop down above your text to select who you want to see it. Everybody or just the people running this webinar? By default, it is the people running the webinar. So you have to change that to everybody for everyone to see it. All right. So our first presentation, and one of our board members who you've all seen many times, is Lauren Imberando. Lauren, take it away.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn my video on. All right, good morning, everyone. So I'm going to start up first, and I'm going to get through this probably about 15, 20 minutes. And what I wanted to cover was, see the title here, After the Click, but I'm talking about the planning and preparation, or focusing in on what do I do in the planning stage, prepare to ensure that I get sharp images. And the topics are, if you don't, just like all of photography, if you don't have a sharp image to start with, you don't have data to work with. That's true with stitching as well. If the lines aren't sharp, you're going to have stitching errors no matter what you do with your equipment. The other, also kind of in the same vein, is making sure that you're capturing the maximum amount of information, and that's the exposures and bracketing. You want to make sure that you've got nice shadows, no blown out highlights and things. So the importance of that. Then how that information, or how I record that on a walkthrough, especially if you're doing a large project. And as Scott said, every project can be different and the sets of equipment that you use can be different. So the approach is different, your techniques and workflows. So what I'm showing you today is some of the things for a high resolution, a very large project, a big museum, for example. So the importance of a walkthrough for that. And then the last subject is customizing your equipment. Once you've got things dialed in right, Scott's going to show you how to set the nodal point. Once you've found that sweet spot, you know your equipment, don't be afraid to start putting tape on things. I'll even show you a piece of equipment that I've taken a chisel to make nice graduation points and put white paint on it so that it stands out. Those are my settings and things. Oops, the next one. Okay, so kind of just standard photography, and this is an entire subject, but I want to point to the importance of it in what we do, and that is hyperfocal distance. I have an image here, and I'll link to a website that I got it from that has a pretty good explanation for it. Most of these are talking about, of course, a landscaping scene or an expansive scene, so it doesn't exactly translate to what we're doing if we're in a room or you're in a ballroom. infinity may not exactly be the farthest wall away from you. So you have to adjust for that. But and it's dependent upon your equipment and the stuff. I'm using or one of my favorite, at least for this type of job, is a Nikon D850. And I'm using a Tamron 15 to 30 millimeter lens on it, and I shoot it at 15 millimeters. And through extensive testing on it, and I recommend, because when extensive, I mean, it takes you a long time. So I recommend getting an audio book that you like and your equipment and spending an entire weekend, 20 hours just tweaking with things to get it all right. So and taking pictures of targets. So for my camera, f8 is perfect. And so I know that at these sweet spot settings that things are, the hyperfocal distance is at 3.1, or sorry, 0.94 meters, and then half of that in front of that is in focus or appropriate or acceptable focus, all the way out to infinity. But I don't accept that. I test those focus settings in a walkthrough, and I'm going to hop to this next page here in a second, where the importance of sometimes if you're going through and you're doing a real estate tour and you're going to be in the center of the room, you're going to be, in this case, a half a meter away from the walls, I can tape off the camera, I can set the focus, and I don't have to worry about it. But if I know at some point I'm going to go up against a picture, or there's going to be a sculpture, or there'll be a map on the wall that I need to get into focus, and it's closer to that, then I need to record that, and I probably are going to have to adjust the camera and mark that on a map. The next one very quickly is, again, all cameras are different, but know the settings and the range that you can operate. And for stitching VR images, the data, the quality of that data, again, not just the sharpness, that was I just talked about, but in this case now, the the richness of the colors. You don't want grain to be appearing. You don't want banding or issues. You don't want blown out things. Those start to cause problems both in the HDR part of the workflow, but ultimately you don't have data for the stitching algorithms to work with. In some cases, though, you do want to adjust your ISO if you're working in you go through a part of a house or an area where it's all of a sudden dark. And now this is going to get more into like the type of work that Jeff would do, where the speed and the workflow, you can't be on site forever. So you may want to bump your ISO from 64 to a little bit up, but you need to know how much. And I know for this setup that I'm okay in this range you see here on the box. So now if I go above 400 ISO, I start to see it in stitching. I start to have errors with the exact same setup, everything else. There's a point, and you need to test that out again, spending time in the daylight, at night, understanding the limits of what and how you can adjust your camera. Uh, Also, you can do what I call a stitching proxy, where if I'm working in an area where there is movement, I can't do anything about it. There's an escalator, there's a TV screen it can't turn off running, a welcome screen or whatever. Then I'm going to have to shoot that at a higher speed to capture that screen, or to not have a blurred out ceiling fan or something like that. And then but I have to shoot that again at the low speed, understanding I'm going to get the blurred out things. But now I have the two panoramas, and I can put those back together in post. Need to mark all of this down though. I also, um, it's, you can't have enough photos. So use big cards, they're not that expensive, and do very generous bracketing. So when you do the walkthrough to the space, and you can see behind me, like there's a dark space right there, and then there's some light. You would walk through the space with the client, with the camera, and you're talking to them, and it's kind of kind of a magic to it. But you'll take pictures, you'll figure out the exposures, so and you've written it down on, and this is an example of a very large project. I don't have it written on here, but I actually have, I don't think with a blur on the camera it'll work, but it's a piece of vinyl. So I went to a Staples, that was like $20, $30, take an image, take their floor plan, see if I can zoom in a little bit. And so I've got all of the marks, and I know because I know the ISO settings, how many pictures I'm going to take, what it typically takes me to move around. I've been able to put the schedule in this so the client has a copy as well. And then I would have marked on here if there's an area, maybe I'm back in this corner and there's no lighting and it's very dark. I would mark, you can see how some of these within the same hour, I'm only doing two, maybe I'm doing three. Again, on the walkthrough, understanding that helps me communicate with the client to that regard. And it helps. It just works now. This isn't something you'd want to do on a like a real estate project or something where you need to move through the space quickly. But let me kind of get scroll out of that. So again, just understanding what you're going to be expecting, the hazards, that's pretty common. I would, if you're, for example, if you're using a Matterport, like a Pro 3 camera or something, it would help you ahead of time to mark down where all of the reflective surfaces are so that you're not relying I know you're during the shoot, you'll mark things out, but what if you miss something and then it becomes a little bit more difficult to look at. Oop, get it back onto here. So the next one is now kind of customizing your equipment. And I talked about don't be afraid. I'm gonna make sure I got the time right. Okay. Don't be afraid of once you get this spot down of of marking things up. Kind of here, so go back. Here's an example of where I know the height that I want the tripod to be at. It's a pretty common one. So I'll mark that with some Sharpies so I'm not having to adjust the height or set it up. The camera itself, I will, like I said, if I've walked through and I've got multiple, and you can't really see it well on this picture, and I don't know if I can show it. Well, I'll mark multiple points, focal points on the camera, which is possible to do, right? It's a free floating dial, but you can rotate it in one direction and you can mark off your infinity and then back off to what the proper infinities might be for that setting. So, and could you guys still hear me? I'm just,
Yes.
okay, cool. I just got to notice that I got an erratic internet connection. So if I lose connection, let me know. So this is this is a panoramic head that again I won't try to show, but I'll zoom in a little bit on it. It's a it's a really nice head, a precision 360 head. It's old. I do need to get myself a new panoramic head. So now I know who to talk to. But it has multiple settings it's kind of a universal. I forget which one this is, but it's not set for a specific camera and rigging. And it's very versatile. And so some of the settings can be in between. If you're on site and it starts to get dark, you can't quite line things up. This one's actually not the one that I did a chisel mark on. This was the one that I did before where I just took two pieces of tape and then I took some white model paint and I painted out what my settings are. So this is for shooting for pretty standard 15 millimeter lens. I shoot one up, six at 30 up, six at 30 down. But I've got 45, 60. I've got all these different settings on here. It doesn't take much to miss. And so I've painted these settings on there. So when I'm on a dark thing or the client's talking to you or something, you don't mess that kind of stuff up. The I should do more about the taping on the lens. I guess the only caution I would have is be careful what you tape your camera with. I use a Frog Delicate tape and I don't leave it on the camera. I will adjust this through the walkthrough. And usually you can do a walkthrough and the client will let you sit in the space. And so you can come back and you've got your map and you can sit and write things down and you can tape off the camera. So when you show up the next day or something, you know you're not going to have any issues with it. And that's always nice for you've done the walkthrough, you're now showing, and which is casual. There's not much going on. People are walking through the space, so the facility or the client hasn't blocked the place off. Now, when you show up, you want to be able to just rock, right? So if you've got your camera in the focus and everything's already set, you're just turning it on, popping it on. You know, you've got all the marks on your tripod, and I use a big dolly for mine. I put it away, but the dolly with wheels, so I like to lock mine down. But that's thing. So really quickly, because I want to kind of wrap up here, kind of into stitching tips. Again, pointing back to the file management is really important. You end up with a lot of images, and if you miss one or the camera, it fires, or the battery drops out or anything else, you that's how I, most of the time when I make a mistake and I am unable to recover from it, and I've got to go back and tell the client, I usually make up some, oh, the fan was moving or something. Usually it's not good practice to tell them, like, I missed a shot. Um, but having a file management, and I use Bridge, and I don't know if I can zoom in on it, but you're seeing here, I'm shooting, this is a one scene. And the reason that I like this Bridge setup is I'm in Essential and I've customized the view. I'm seeing all of the images for that scene. So these are the 16, the next one down. So I only have to just click the down arrow. I have all of my images in one folder. So I can select, if I have this one, I've got, I might have, well, 100 scenes or whatever, right? You can put those into 100 different folders, but then you've got to go into each of those 100 different folders and grab the bracketed shots, color correct and whatever else, export them out as TIFFs, and then or you place all of the images into a single folder. You scroll to the bottom, you grab the entire strip like you see here, and you can see that out of this folder, I won't delete these interior images. Every once in a while, you've got to go back, and one of these images ends up, the client sees some issue, and you end up, so I never throw away those, but I know that for each scene, these are the images that I actually used, where I grabbed 4 out of. Now, this is a little bit more than I typically only use 3, and I'll shift off, right? So I'm shooting an extra 2 stops below and above what I have recorded during my walkthrough, so that I can shoot without changing the camera or touching the settings on it at all. That's another area where I mess up. And I'll end up with all of the imagery I need. I may need to grab the first 3, adjust it, but I've got everything I need. The last tip that I'll give you, and again, within this file management, if you've got reflections, you've got a moving thing, you've got a client where they want all of the glare removed off the cases. And the best way to do that is, and it's painful, is you shoot and then you have black fabric all, covering everything but the object, and you light it and everything else, and you shoot that again. You need to record all of that in the settings. And then the last one and a lot of people don't know this one. I don't know if it's in the documentation, but it's just basic math for an equation, and kind of high leveling this or simplifying it. But in a stitching algorithm, PT GUI in this case is what you're looking at. You're looking at the control points table for PT GUI. If you look at the error distance there at the end, which is your measure, right? The larger the number, the more likely you are to have stitching errors. You'll notice that there's a tail end, and you can click on the distance and it'll flip it either way. So you can notice the triangle there. I'm looking at it in descending mode. And you can see I go 8.4, 7.9, 7.5, and I jump to 6. That's a non-linear, right? If I'm looking at error, that's the portion of the curve where the error is rapidly increasing. If you go look at those, a lot of times those points are going to be on clouds, in mirrors, blurred kind of reflections, that when the camera moved, it changed. You can just grab all of that and try it. Grab it and just delete it. Re-optimize, look at it again. Usually, I know with this setup that if I get the distance error down to under 3, there's not going to be any stitch errors in the image, most likely, that I have to worry about. Um, and that, I think we started a little bit late, but yeah, we're a little bit 5 over, so I made us up 2 points. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing and then turn it over to Scott. And I'll happy to answer questions on this at the end. So I'll turn off my video.
Okay. Let's see, I get my presentation back up here. All right. First having to do with my equipment and why I use it. I shoot personally with a Canon 5D Mark IV and the Canon 8 to 15 zoom fisheye, which I lock down at 12 millimeters because at 12 millimeters, oops, now I have to start sharing screens. Excuse me while I do this. 12 millimeters, you get a full use of the image top to bottom. Oh, geez. Okay, am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Okay. Yeah, I've got a new computer and let's say it is being temperamental on me. All right. All right, anyway. So I also take down my settings. I use black gaffer's tape. Those of you who have been involved with commercial photography or videography are very familiar with it in that it does not leave residue. Absolutely do not tape anything with gaffer's tape or electrical tape that leaves residue that will get into your lens, and that's the last thing that you want to have happen. Gaffer's tape does not leave residue, which is its major advantage. Okay. And like I said, lock it down at 12 millimeters. This gives me, with this camera setup, gives me a 14,000 by 7,000 equirectangular image, which happens to be the largest that Google allows for Google Street View, so it's very convenient. Let's see. For a panel head, I use the 360 Precision Atome, which is a really nice solid, or was, I guess. I don't think 360 Precision is in operation anymore, but it's really nice for how it works with setting everything up and just being able to move. But my other big secret, if you'll call it that, and I sort of discovered the adjustment heads that they have in videography tripods, where they have to be able to quickly set the tripod head to level with the horizon, and so that when you do a panning motion that it will stay level. Well, same thing here. We want to level our cameras even with the horizon so that it will the equirectangular image that you get will be level with the horizon. All right, so I found this really slick adjustment stage right here, which is made by Slick, and it's called the what is it called? Slick Leveling Unit 2. They go for like $53 on Amazon, but with it, you can real quickly adjust your panel, adjust your head so that it's absolutely level. My presentation today is primarily going to be about how you are really, how to be efficient in what you do. Okay, I'm going to bounce around a little bit here. Today, if I were to recommend a camera lens, I would personally go with one of the Canon EOS R5 variations, because it gives you 45 megapixels instead of 30, gives you a little bit more resolution, which gives you better results. I would stay with the 8 to 15 millimeter fisheye lens, and because that's an EF to RF um, combination, you need the adapter. If we have 50 people here today, there's probably 50 variations on what people would recommend. I just would suggest doing your research, trying various combinations, seeing what fits your budget and working style. I've been a Canon guy since high school, and it's just the ecosystem I really love. All right. When I shoot, I always shoot in RAW. There are people who feel that that's a waste because it is big files, but it gives you all the adjustment that you can do. If you aren't quite right on exposure, and especially if you're not quite right on color balance, you can easily make the adjustments in RAW. If you shoot in JPEG, that is much more limited. The next thing is color calibration. If you shoot in RAW, you kind of don't have to worry about it because you can make all the adjustments later. But there is this really nice, I guess it's now made by Calibrite, but it was X-Rite Color Checker Passport, which has all these color patches in them. And using this, you are actually able to calibrate your lens and camera sensor to give you exactly the right color reproduction independent of the lighting source. If you've ever done product photography, something like this is critical. If you're doing these virtual tours, it isn't quite as big of a deal, but you still want to have a neutral white. So also on the other side, you have neutral white, 18% gray card. You can also, this thing costs about $100, which, if it's necessary, it's really useful. You can also just get a regular gray card, 18% gray card. That will be very useful. If you don't have that, try to have something that is a known white in your shot. It might be some typing paper, it might be a label on a mailing label on a box. It might even be tissue paper that you can then use to color calibrate. Or there's this other kind of nifty thing where it's a diffuser you put over your lens, shoot a couple shots, and then use your camera's custom white balance calibration to give the color balance for the scene. Makes it a little faster for color balancing in the end, but in the end, you're probably still going to want to go in there and fine tune it. Okay. Oh, I almost always shoot my first shot of the sequence facing north. There's several reasons for that. Then when you are connecting panoramas, they will all be starting from the same orientation, which makes it much faster to connect from one to the other, especially in like a Google Street View situation. So you don't have to rotate the panoramas as much. And also, it helps you keep track of, have I shot all four directions, assuming that you're doing something like one of these fisheye lenses. And okay, well, once again, problems, but I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Like I said, bad. Computer doesn't want to cooperate with me. All right. When you're working with your images, a properly calibrated and profiled monitor is in my mind critical so that you know that it fits an absolute standard. Without that, you might be too blue, too yellow, too green. And if you're adjusting based on what looks good to you on the screen, then the vast majority of people across the internet may end up having images that don't look good on their computers. So get a color calibrator. I use an X-Rite i1 Photo, which does both monitors and printers. In this day, it's really all you need is probably a monitor thing, and you can get one of those for a lot less. But if you're going to be doing professional work, I would say it is indispensable. Okay, after I have shot all my images, oh, did I mention one thing to be very, very careful of is when you sometime during the shots, maybe after each panorama that you shoot, double check that you have shot all your directions. Um, you just don't want to miss it. So at some point before you leave the scene, I always double check to make sure that I have gotten every single direction on every single viewpoint. And embarrassing as it is, I occasionally do miss something when the action is getting intense or whatever, and I forget. Rare, but it has happened. All right, now share screen. And, all right, so what I end up doing is importing everything into Lightroom. And first of all, are you seeing the screen that has the Lightroom on it?
Yes.
Somebody?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Good, thank you. All right. When in Lightroom, I then do my color corrections and exposure corrections. And I'll quickly just demonstrate here. Like in this scene here. Oops. If you don't have, if you haven't shot a color calibration 18% card or something like that, that you can then use that to do use your eyedropper to do your color calibration. If you've got a scene with a known white, you can always just use that and then click on it to calibrate for white. And I don't know if you can see it up over in the upper right, but you'll see all the colors here are like 86. So this has been properly adjusted for a neutral white balance. Neutral may only be where you're starting, and then you might want to make it a little bit warmer, possibly cooler. In this case, neutral was really what I wanted. Then, once you've got color calibration for correct for one view, you'll notice that it's going to be, in cases like this, the exact same lighting throughout much of the scene. You can just use that same exposure and light balance or white balance calibration and just paste it across all of the images. And in that way, just make your workflow way faster. Let's see. Then what I'll do is I will export everything from here to the hard drive as JPEGs into a folder that I call brackets. You can see here. Then what I'll do is, where are you? Okay, apologies. Oh, I use Photomatics for my HDR. So what I'll do is I'll take a sample selection and do a test merge to HDR in Photomatics. You'll see that they have a couple standard versions. I almost always will go for neutral. At times, that's a fusion neutral, fusion blending. At times, tone map realistic works well. I rarely go beyond those, but then I have personal adjustments that I like to make, maybe increasing the strength a little bit, maybe increasing or decreasing brightness. But once I get it set to what I want it to look like, then I'll finish the processing of this one. And then those recordings are in Photomatics. So then what I do is I go to bracketing and I select the folder, which in this case was the brackets folder. And in this case, I shot three brackets of three. For me, it's usually brackets of 3 or 5. 5 is more common. And then set that once they're all processed, they go to another folder, in this case called parts. Here's the other thing. As far as style, go to all styles. And then as far as preset, go to previous session, non-batch. That was the setting that I did in my test merge. And that way it'll be used in all of the merges that you do in Photomatics, which you will now do in bulk. If you need to do some other custom things, like actually in this particular case, a mild contrast added to it, if you need to align images, like if they were handheld, or if there's ghosting, do that here, and then you just run it. And then go get a cup of tea or whatever, do something else. It'll take a little while. But once it's all done, then I've got all.
I think we have frozen Scott again.
Yep.
I'm gonna go ahead and just while he gets back on, I was gonna just
Yeah, he'll be back.
Oh, he's back?
No, not yet.
Okay. I was gonna address some of the questions. Somebody wrote about the difference between creating HDR images using RAW and JPEG. Always shoot in RAW if you can. JPEG is a processed or baked in, you've lost information with the JPEG. So think of JPEG as the final, like a PDF, if you will. So always shoot in RAW if you're going to be doing any processing. And let's see. There's another question here about this is a tricky one, is when you're dealing with mixed color or temperature sources, which is common for our situations, right? You're indoor real estate, indoor spaces, and you got, sorry, I put my video back on so you guys can see me. My tape off. So you're dealing in an environment where you've got a lot of incandescent, outdoor sources, whatever. One trick to try is you've shot in RAW, so you can auto white balance those images, load them all individually into Adobe Camera Raw or whatever software you're using for adjusting for white balance, and allow it to do an auto balance. The best process is to, if you know that there's different lighting sources, go ahead and using gray cards, place them in the different spaces that you might have. And I tend not to hold the card up. I tend to think about, and I won't share my screen, but if I take them in cases where I've got an sunlight coming in, it's on the floor, cases where I have a very bright wall, and I know that might cast some color onto it. Grab those numbers and then you can adjust them. I guess the point is load them into the stitching software, because it has the ability to blend across your images, and sometimes that'll do a blending. Let's see. Some talking about the zoom lenses fixed. That's a pretty typical conversation about whether you're going to use a fisheye, which of course will have some distortion on the outer edges, versus if you're using a macro or rectilinear. lens, you'll have less distortion in that. But when you're using, I shoot with this is one I'm shooting, it's a large 15 to 30 millimeter. I can shoot at 15 millimeters, but sometimes I can push it, and that's why I like a variable lens. And you can experiment where I can shoot like somebody's saying 24. I can pump the resolution up. This at 15 millimeters, this gives me it floats depending on the stitching because there's a cropping in there, typically around 23,000, and I'll crop it back always to 22,000 by 11,000. But in some cases, if I'm in, oh, here's back. I'll turn it back over to you, Scott.
Hey, Jeff, you want to go ahead and start your presentation?
Yeah. If that's all right. So I guess he's technical difficulties. All right, cool. Yeah. I'm Jeff, and so what I'm demonstrating today is how I shoot. So I primarily shoot in the restaurant space, hospitality. Been doing a lot of bars, restaurants, for Google, and just also create a panorama specifically for their website. So its business has been great. I love using my Ricoh Theta here for those shots with people because it captures 360 one shot. And there was a time when I got this, it was kind of more just for fun. I never thought the image quality was really there to charge, $100 per panorama, which is my fee. And so anyways, I love this camera because the workflow that I've created has been just game changing. Kind of people use that term all the time. But anyways, without further ado, let me share my screen and walk you through let's see, where do I do this? Okay. All right. So first of all, you guys can all see this, hopefully. All right.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. So basically, all I've done is I transferred the image that I shot yesterday from the camera to my computer, and I've got the DNG file here, and I've already I bring this into Lightroom, so I have it here. And let me go ahead and get rid of me. There you go. And so anyways, I have it in. I'm going to hit develop. And this is my friend Joseph, bartender here, passing me a beverage. So in any case, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go up here and hit auto. And boom, just kind of, there you go. I purposely, underexposed it because I'm sitting, against a, big area with light pouring in from the patio, etc. And I just always do auto first, and then kind of starting from the bottom, I'll just kind of tweak the sliders here until it feels like what it looks like actually being there. So drop that down. And the Lightroom Classic, of course. Shadows. Bring down the highlights. Just kind of hoping you could see more of the patio, but it was pretty bright. Contrast is good. All right, so that's pretty decent. Again, I was hoping to get more greenery out here, but there you go. So in any case, so after this point, then I'll come down to the denoise button. This is where everything, when I learned, when Adobe came out with this, I was like, wow, this is incredible. Because again, I mean, this is great, but it's just so much noise in it. So in any case, go ahead and pop that on. And usually I'll just kind of go to a face, maybe not that face. Anyways, let's just go here and see what looks best. I know that if you do this too much, it turns your image kind of into I like a cartoon. Here, let's go to this guy's face. Or let's see, let's be mine. Okay, that's, no one wants to see that. So anyways, I'm going to drop this down to, I find that around 50 seems to work pretty well. And then you just kind of move this. And then there you go. I don't look too cartoony and hit enhance. And any case, and this takes about, a few seconds here. But this, once again, with the denoise, or denoise, I mean, however you want to pronounce it, it just changes everything. Because again, these images were kind of, they were fun for like parties and, nature and stuff like that. But this feature right here makes this image, worth $100 to my clients. So not specifically this one. This was just for fun. But so in any case, let's let this process finish out here. Okay, there you go. And I'm going to go ahead and export that. Okay. And so here I have my my exported DNG, and I'm going to bring this into Pano 2VR. Let's see. VR. Okay. And then before, so this is just, again, my workflow. Oops. That's not the one. Oh, I know. Hang on. Shoot. Okay. All right. There you go. I usually do all my editing on my laptop. So this is a little live excitement. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my tripod here. And the beauty of whatever we call this. Generative fill here. All right, that's good. Save. Come back to Pano 2VR here. Oop. And I'm still sharing. Okay, good deal. All right, excellent. So then just going to come this way, and I'm going to export this or convert it. So the okay. So there you go. There's my just recently converted shot. So then the next step is I'm going to bring this into Photoshop. And then what I like to do is I bring it into, I open up RAW, and okay, let's get rid of this. Nope. Okay. And then what I'll do here is I'll just kind of hit auto just to see if that changed. Usually it just in Photoshop, it just kind of brightens it a little bit. But here, then I'll just play with it just a little bit more and maybe remove some of the glare coming in from the windows. Again, this is just, whatever looks best to you. Again, I don't want to get too crazy with it, but let's just say that's cool. I'm going to save that. And then from here, I'll kind of zoom into it and just see if there's anything that, that I want to get rid of. Sometimes people are making weird faces. Sometimes you don't want people's faces obvious if you're going to put it on Google. And what I find is just using the smudge tool, not the burn tool, but the, well, let's see, I guess that's the smudge one. Yeah. Yeah, smudge. Okay. And so here, let's just say that she just, she looks a little angry. So we'll just kind of do a little blur here. little blur here. Just kind of make it so people really can't, recognize themselves. Usually I do a lot more, sort of like that. So any case, for photos like this for Google, I'll just go do that. And then once I get my blurring done, kind of make sure that the rest of the image is good. Don't need to do too much. And then I'll come here and I'll filter, going to sharpen it. And then, so then what I do, this tells me that I've kind of edited, I'm going to change the file name and just bring it down to be basically 15615 and hit save. Okay. Oh yeah. And then also I'm going to go ahead and flatten the image. Okay. And then hit save again. And then from here, oh, sorry guys. Okay. So there's my image. That then one last step is I'm going to bring it back into pan up to VR. And then I'm going to set up. So basically I'll set up where Joseph is getting ready to pass over my beverage. And I'll go ahead and set the default view on that. And then I'm going to come over here and hit share. And this allows me to then post it to Facebook, where a majority of this photo, this is just a totally for fun kind of photo. Then I'll come over to Facebook. And well, okay, anyways, I'm not going to go through all these all right, again, I don't use this computer very often, like my laptop. Anyways, so there you go. That's basically what I do. That's my workflow for shooting with the Theta. This camera has been great because what I do is if you experience my webinar that I did back in January, what I do, my workflow and what seems to work really, really great is I go and I shoot the space with my Nikon for Google for Google Maps. And then I come in and I shoot these kind of as if you were there photos with the Theta, capturing people having fun and eating and drinking, and then I merge those into the whole panoramic presentation. So you get basically from the owner's perspective, restaurateurs don't like to see their restaurants empty ever. It's like that's psychologically horrible. But for Google, obviously it has to be empty. So, so anyway, so I'll shoot it, like I said, for Google, empty. And then I come in and I'll drop these photos in, these 360 panoramas of people sitting at a bar, etc., to share the best of both worlds. So an empty, beautiful restaurant, and now a restaurant full of people having fun and enjoying themselves. And there you go. Hopefully this was something that you guys enjoyed and got something from it. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. And I'll stop sharing my screen.
Excellent. Can everyone hear me now? Can anyone hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh, good.
I'll come back on too.
All right. See, Forrest, you asked a question about automating with getting rid of the tripod and such, and I'm going to be showing that in my hopefully wrap up, and I hope I don't crash session here. So go back to screen 2. What I'm trying to show in here is how I automate all the steps, and that's really important for me, if I'm doing a Google tour. In my market, they would never support $100 per panorama, which means I have to find a way to be far more efficient in processing so that I could charge less. On my major tours, I charge way more than $100 per panorama, and then I can do an awful lot of handwork and get much better results that way. All right, so we went through where I did all the automated or batching to the parts that have been HDR. Then when it comes, there's parts, then when it comes to batching the stitching, PT GUI has a batch builder where you just import all these parts, and then you tell it to go to or send it all to the stitcher. I'm not going to do that now because, but just know that click generate projects, and while they're generating all of the point clouds and everything, it will send it all to the stitcher, and then it stitches them all. One comment was made that you can level in PT GUI, which you absolutely can. The reason that I like leveling the tripod is because it makes it easier to do all this batch work. PT GUI has gotten way better in so many things, so its auto leveling is really very good, but still works better if you can start out with a level image to begin with. All right. After I've done that and then have generated all the panoramas, and oh dear. Panels. Okay, so we've got all the panoramas, and you will, however, notice that it does have still the tripod and everything down here. What I do, I have a script in Photoshop. Do I have it up here? There we are. A script in Photoshop, which runs an action.
Turn on
So
your screen sharing.
it says that I am screen sharing. You don't see it?
No, we're not seeing anything.
Nope.
Ah, jeepers. Sorry, guys.
You can describe it to us.
No, it should. I don't see why it's not. Screen
I think because you logged in as me.
shouldn't be.
There you
All right.
go. Okay, now you're sharing.
Now I'm sharing?
Yep.
Okay, good. Very good. Okay, so you didn't get to see the batch. Just know that there's the batch building and stitching tool in PT GUI, which automates making all of these panoramas. And then I have this action in Photoshop. Let me see where, let's see. Classic. All right, so I have built this where what I do is I could not nudge. Oh, okay. Sorry. All right. I don't know if you'll be able to see this real clearly, but I grab a 2-pixel section of the image that is at a space where I know it'll be outside of the tripod, but not too far. And this is all recorded in an action. All right, then copy it, paste it back, and then do a transform where I just simply stretch it all the way down to the bottom, and then do Gaussian blur on that, and then it gets saved. Well, first what it'll do is it'll merge down to merge down so you're back down to just the one layer, and then it'll save it back to the folder. This ends up looking a lot more like a regular Google Street View, and because it's all done in batch, I can just get it running. It executes the whole thing automatically, and then I'm done. Again, for doing this efficiently, this is the way to do it in my mind. Now, back here with, let's see. All right, let's go 1501. Nope, that's not it. Apologies. 1501. Why is this? Okay, and now the editor. All right, so the current version of PT GUI has this nadir patching capability built in. This obviously will take more time to do than if you have automated batch, but it's really pretty cool. It makes it go way faster if you are doing this by hand. So they have the patching capability. You click the generate patch, puts you in the patch editor. You then are going to do a selection just like you do in Photoshop. And then you find a similar area. Oops, okay, go up here. Match it. And you get a patch which is pretty good. And I did this real fast, so it's not positioned exactly right. But now you've got this patch, and you will notice, where are we here? There we are. And you'll notice it has added the patch in with the rest of the images. So now when you output this as a panorama, and here I'm just, oops, you know, it's already patched for you. And that's works really well. Let's see. Okay. Let's save. But if you got a much more complicated nadir, such as this one here, with a tile floor like this, I don't know for sure if the PT GUI nadir patch would work well enough or not, but I'm going to just demonstrate how it kicks out to Photoshop. And then you can use why aren't you doing this for me? All right, so same thing here. We're just selecting generative fill. And you probably have all seen generative fill, how it works. It goes fairly fast and does a really good job. I consider that really good. So then save it back. Oops, yeah, forgot to merge it. Now I can save it. And then you go back to Go back to PT GUI, and it didn't do it. All right, I'm not going to spend that much more time on this, but when you save it back, all the times I've done this before, it saved it back to where it's supposed to go, and then it automatically again incorporates it into your panorama. This makes nadir patching for me work way faster than it ever used to, and I get better results out of it. I still on occasion might have to shoot a down shot in order to match exactly what's down below the tripod, but I don't have to spend all that time putting in the points and patching it back in that way. This goes so much faster. All right, I think that is the wrap up of what I do. And like I said, the main thing here, automation for efficiency, if you're doing something like Google Street View. And if you're not, it at least gives you a start that works much faster. And then you can go in there and make adjustments by hand for everything that you would need. Okay, I think I'm done with my presentation. What questions do you guys have or comments? Maybe you have way better ways of doing things than what you have seen from us.
The answer should be yes, because there's just so many different ways to do these things. And if I find that if I don't continue to stay up on, like if I was still sharpening in Photoshop and hadn't started using Topaz AI or that sharpening tool, I'd be losing it. So I'm hoping to hear. I always like it when people tell me, obviously, if you're working on this and somebody comes and says, that's not a good way to do it, here's a much better way, it's much faster. You really shouldn't be like, how dare you?
We have a hand raised.
Okay, just click on the hand and then they can ask the question.
Oh, I was trying to answer the questions in the chat, and it's some good subjects here and some themes to it as well. We talked a little bit about the leveling.
Mhm. All right, I'm going to let Jay go ahead, ask your question.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I've got an echo, so I'm going to take the headset off while I speak. Um, Basically, my suggestion, I really like the workflow Lauren Price has when it comes to automatically selecting the pixels and bringing them down and Gaussian blurring them.
That
I
would
picked
actually be
up
Scott Woody.
a pretty little trick which could also be automated, where basically what you do is you go from the same line, but you select the top part of the picture and then you flop it to the bottom. And then add a slight shadow. And I'll put in the chat the result. You get this kind of chrome ball, which is rather elegant and really, yeah, mirror balling exactly. And you can really automate it really easily if you don't want to have the perfect result that you would have with patching.
Yeah, I was going to mention we talked about patching, but um, I've had some clients where they're doing a tour that they have on a website or on a product page, and then they're doing a Google Street Map alternative of that. And what they want to do is they want me to patch the floor, but then they want, because Google allows you, I forget what it is, but there's a certain portion of the nadir where you can put in branding, and they want that to put in there because why would they they actually get a far more traffic from the Google Street View version, right? Because nobody knows about their website. Everybody's on Google. They can see enough that there's enough of their logo that the person has a tendency to look down, and then they see the QR code. And so I'm thinking that's probably one of the best practices for, for a commercial application. So, and I like this mirror ball, also. It's kind of a cool, or the little planet. I think that's a clever way to do it. Because sometimes workflow wise, if you're trying to make it perfect, nobody really looks down at the ground anyway. to be honest. If you've seen the metrics, most people don't look at their feet. So, you can actually, in some cases, we talked about patching it. In some cases, if you're in a setting and you've already got a lot of controls, you're doing partial panoramas or something, just lock the view out so they can't look down at them. That is the cheapest and most efficient way of doing it, is the brute force of just lock the viewpoints so they're not able to look up at the ceiling, and you don't have to worry about brutal lens flares, and they can't look, I think it's 30 or 40 degrees down. It doesn't tend to hurt the tour's usability or its interaction, because again, most people do not. It's not natural to look up at the sky or at your feet. If you're already in the space mentally, you know where you're at. You don't do that.
Although probably all of us do that when we're checking out other panoramic.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, and
Forrest,
that's yeah.
Forrest
so sorry.
Brennan, Forrest Brennan asked a question. Do you remove do you all ever remove tripods for 360 video using still images? If so, how does your workflow change?
Mm. That's a tricky one. That's rotoscoping, basically, right? You have a moving image and a defect in it, and you're trying to paint, because 360 video, you're most likely moving the camera as well. And so now you're not going to go through. If you try to do each of the individual floors, if you try to put a patch over, things like that, you can have it's too much of a disconnection. And that's where you get, like, this isn't my realm, so somebody correct me, but that's where it's rotoscoping, and that's where you're using, is it Miska or Mystica, or I always get that.
Actually, it's been Premiere. You can use Photoshop and then lay it down on top of as a layer. But Mick and a couple of other people have addressed this one on YouTube on
Because
how to retouch out the tripod.
I think the answer that, from, because it's not my realm, is you're moving from imagery into video. So you're using now a different set of tools. Like if you're doing color correction on our imagery, you're in Photoshop and stuff. You do color correction of video, you're into a DaVinci Resolve and Premiere and After Effects. So it kicks you into a different tool. And we need to get more into 360 video, because very cool application.
As long
Yeah.
as you don't move the camera, if you're not doing a dolly shot, I guess, you can shoot the nadir, create the patch, and then you just layer it over, like in Premiere, that section of the video, and get rid of the tripod that way. Hugh did have a video that he went through the entire workflow of that. So it is doable.
I see a question here from Todd asking me. It says, Jeff, I missed your reasoning. Why do you take a session with your single lens and then capture the fun images with your 360? So again, it's a blended tour that I create. It's been really popular. In fact, I just kind of I just got creative one day and then merged, like I said, the 360 photo with a theta into my still tour for Google. I don't actually put that up on posted to Google directly, but I do create a separate tour for the client. So anyways, it's the best of both worlds. You get an empty restaurant, and then you get a restaurant full of people having fun, and it just, whoever's viewing that tour gets to see that, hey, this is a fun place. Hopefully that's the intention. So that's why I do those blended tours that way. And I'll tell you, ever since I started doing this, I get more yeses than I get nos these days, and that's great, because I love what I do. So hopefully that answers the question.
A good sign of a restaurant is how many cars are parked around it.
That too.
Yep.
See, we had a conversation about generative fill, and I just wanted to mention, if you're not aware of it, when you start to work on our images, and we're working with very large resolutions, the Adobe software is not that great as far as the manual goes. When you do the generative fill, make sure you're checking the fine detail button. If you don't know what that is, look it up, because by its default setting, if you're working on your nadir patch and you're selecting that area and you're working with the images we were talking about, 15,000, you're working on a large enough image that the first generative fill that Adobe does is an approximation, and it's not as good as it can do. You have to click a little button that'll be next to the three variations, and it's not labeled. It's a little tiny button in the upper right, and you click it and it'll say again, updating detail. And that, especially if I'm looking at a floor, a wood floor or a carpet or something, and you first do the generative fill and it looks kind of not quite as, that's what that is. So that's a very important step if you're using generative fill. And then unfortunately, Affinity, if you're using Affinity, the live projection mode was wonderful for editing. You can still do that, but they do not have generative fill in Affinity. They do not have the money to invest in it. And so unfortunately, Affinity is slowly dropping away, and sad because I really like that interface and not having to pay every month for the same. You buy Affinity every month when you're on Adobe.
Uh, just as a side note, Adobe is going to start charging for, they bumped up the price to almost $70, $69.99 a month now for 4,000 credits with AI. So, and you can get and if you are on Creative Cloud, you can dial it back to a standard version, which is $59.99 a month.
Can you turn it on and off? Because I've always wondered, is it starting to get like it's getting to the construction model where I'm going to rent the bulldozer for when I have the job versus paying? Because it's $70 a month for 12, do the math,
Yeah.
we're getting close to $1,000. I don't use Photoshop every single day. Am I going to change my workflow to where, boom, I put my Photoshop work is in a week and I charge the client for, the rental? I don't know.
The standard version is supposed to give you 25 credits per month. So I don't know how that equates out.
What do you know about getting credits by generating imagery? Are you aware of that? That you can, because they need people to generate imagery and then they sell that to off the stock Adobe. Anybody familiar with or anybody doing that? Where I had a client, it was a yard care company, and I needed to have some pictures of a person mowing the lawn and a low angle, and I couldn't find it in actual photography, so I did it in AI. And later on, I got a notice from Adobe that they were taking my nice little lawnmower image and they were now selling it, and I got some credits for that. Anybody familiar with that whole?
No, that's a rabbit hole that deserves to be looked at, because Adobe's really starting to kind of get out there. You have to really keep an eye on them.
I think a person's asking here about the resolution. I don't know the answer exactly if it's what their limit is it 1024, but I believe it's higher than that.
Mm-hmm.
And you might be looking at the 1024 by 1024 is the default, what it just gives you, because it doesn't want to operate at the highest level because that's processing on their back end and that's costing them money. Be aware of all of this also when you're dealing with AI engines. You shouldn't say please and thank you and things like that. And if you start to ask it for the same thing again and again, it will stop giving it to you because it's costing them money. So anyway, I was somebody's talking about just getting back to the Adobe Suite. I don't know about the educational. I've always wanted to, like, it'd be worth opening a school to teach people just to get the education price on. We're getting there.
There is, I wish I could remember what it was. There is an online course where you can go as sort of like a designer, learn how to do logo design, things like that. Costs $100 to join it, but then you can stay a student forever. Now you have student credentials, which can be used for Adobe to get the student discount as long as you have done that.
Weren't we getting some kind of a discount through Tech Buzz?
Yeah, but that's only because we're
A member of Tech Buzz.
right. Yeah.
Here's a piece of advice for if we got some younger members online, or if you think you're going to live for a long time. Sign up for the beta programs. Adobe and things like those, and actually participate in them. And when you have to, sometimes they're invite, but if you sign up for a beta version of, like, I'm a beta tester for, unfortunately not Adobe, but I get Filter Forge. There's a couple other ones where I get that software for free now because I've been a beta tester long enough, and I actually do fill out, like when I find a bug, you got to give them something back. And so I'll write them and say, or I'll spend, a little time writing up, you should do the following, whatever. Then you get on that program and then you start getting invites for it. And so it's an investment, but a long-term way if you can get your software is to become a tester of stuff. And I'm getting my AI models. I'm not having to pay my chat GPT. This is important. I'm not having to pay my chat GPT bill right now, right? The $20 a month, because I'm through LinkedIn. I applied to become a tester for, there's two of them, outliner.ai and then data annotation. And I shouldn't be telling everybody this, but you're all members. So if you apply and they have you do a couple it's going to be a couple hours. It's not a big deal. They just ask you basic math questions. Once you get approved to bid on jobs and to do jobs, you get access to all of the latest AI beta models, and they have a playground and a training area you can play with those. You don't actually have to go and start doing jobs. So, wink, wink. And so now they're probably I'm going to go back and it's going to be turned off. I'm like, oh, you ratted it out. Anyway, that's just try to find ways to get your software for free and avoid the whole, or get a down payment on your Air subscription.
Uh, Marco asked about the webinar, if it's available for download, and yes, it is. You can.
Will
It will be available tomorrow or
We
the
got to
next day.
chop out our dead spots.
Yeah. Uh, there's a little bit of editing, and then I try to do a teaser reel, which I like to bring out at the same time as the webinar goes live so that I don't. I'll tell you what we'll do is we'll have the edited webinar, which will be posted on the website. That'll be for members. And then the announcement of the webinar being available will go out once the teaser has been cut. That should be a couple days at most.
Yeah,
But
everyone will get an email
Yeah.
for that.
right. Yeah, really being able to go back to these webinars to me is so important because I don't know about you guys, but I miss half the stuff that comes across when I'm watching it live. So being able to look at it again is really helpful.
I was going to just throw another kind of a wild tip that if you'd never tried it, and I used to do it in situations where I had to, but now with AI, it's becoming something I've been playing with. When you go to stitch a panorama, and in most camera rigs, you're going to shoot one up and then some variation of the side ones, right? And you're already patching out the nadir. Throw out the zenith, right? That's called the upshot, and do both of them. And the stitching PT GUI, I haven't finished the testing on it because I love to just look at the numbers, right? You get a number. From what I'm telling, in almost every case, and especially where I'm outside and I have clouds, if I'm only trying to stitch the ribbon, right, that's the shots around me, and I don't have one at the top that it's all trying to anchor to, and that upshot is usually the one where you've got problems, lens flares, clouds moving, things, I get a much better stitching number. And I go through the process. I've already broken it up into cubic formats, right? So I've got the down image. It's no big deal to just grab the up image, and it's the same hole size. Actually, it's much smaller hole size for the up than it is for the nadir, and it's really not that big of a hole. And I'm finding that in a lot of cases, I'm able to, and I'm starting to wonder, do I even need to shoot the upshot with AI? So just play around with that. Play around with just
And
not.
with new PT GUI, doing that patching of the zenith would be real fast.
Yeah. You play around with your workflows, and like I said, grab an audiobook because you spend a lot of time. And when you think you got your camera set up right, if you're setting up a panel head that's adjustable and you've dialed it in, take the thing and, just make the smallest of setting and move something back and I just set it up next to me, next to my TV in the living room, and I just shoot it, have the laptop process it, see what the stitching number is, move the thing the tiniest, like, tenth of a millimeter, run it again, right? And you can just go back and forth on all of and you eventually get to the camera, boom, dialed in. But you got to be willing to spend the hours to do it. But anyway, that's um,
Uh, you're talking about setting the non-parallel parallax point, or
yeah, things like that, or any settings that you're doing. Well, it could be anything where you think you have an adjustable setting. I guess the point is take the time to really dial in your equipment and to understand it, um, and adjust it and go by the stitching number, go through the whole process. One of the things that's always helped me is before I go to a photo shoot, I will always set up all of my equipment, shoot a panorama in my, room or whatever, process it, make sure it's all working, and then pack everything up. It's all taped off and I don't touch it.
Mhm.
Um,
And you're still using the adjust.
yeah, I used to have my favorite rig that I ever had was a Precision 360, and it was a D200 camera, and I think it was called Absolute, and it was made specifically for a D200 using a 10.5 millimeter. So that rig where you put it all together and it's locked in, there's a question about templates. Templates are wonderful. The control point template, but they only work if your equipment is really tight.
Yeah.
Each shot is, and as you go up in resolution, you start to shoot at 20, 30,000 resolutions. I found that the templates don't work for me anymore because my equipment, no matter how tight I get it, it's not repeatable. I shift the camera, right? You move to a new scene, you shoot the scene, things, and you want to try the exact same control point net to it. I don't get the same results and it might just be the PT Cooey has gotten better at, or a lot of times if there's anything reflective in the scene, then the templates start to break down because if there's something and you're seeing a reflection on it, that is not an image that is going to look the same when you move to a different scene because the reflection is different. So that's why reflections and mirrors, break down a matter report or things like that, because that is not an object that the algorithms can align because it's a reflection. It looks different and changes depending on your vantage point.
The reason I moved out of the adjust into the atone is because I no longer have to adjust for where the camera is. The camera will always be dead center, on the center of the tripod. And then it's just a matter of moving it forward or back to get the actual nodal point
Yep.
set. And that's why I love this. Of course, they no longer exist apparently. But Jeff, I assume that Nodal Ninja has something very similar to that.
Oh yes, it's the R10. So
Yeah, that configuration, and I have a version, an old 360 Precision, same thing, and it grabs onto the lens, the barrel. Yours is an upgrade to that because grabbing onto the barrel and clamping onto it turned out not to be the greatest idea. Um, but that R10 from Nodal Ninja, if you're just getting into this and you're wanting to do production work and make money and stuff, that fisheye 4-shot thing, right? No up and down, and on that where you're just putting the body, I think that's the best configuration. Certainly the cheapest.
And again, this is tilted back slightly.
Mhm.
So that takes care of your zenith automatically.
Yep.
And then you don't care down here because you don't want to see the tripod. So it'll be mostly in the black. And then you just patch that if you want that to be patched.
Just want to get back to the question about the templates, and yeah, if you're doing a number of shots, and you want to use templates, it's worth the investment. And if you're having, I would run across what I call outliers, right? The template's not working on all of them. I don't know what the numbers are, right? You'll get like 10, 20% that don't stitch right. Yeah, go back and just open those up. And I found that if in PT GUI, if I just opened that one image that wasn't working correctly and ran the optimizer with, I think it's heavy lens shift, that is kind of taking care of the reflections or light that might be the reason why the template is breaking down is because the scene you're in now, something's different. That tends to level it out for us. So I'd give that a shot.
And in my case, I've set up the project so that it automatically will align the images with every single panorama that I feed into it. And then it automatically does heavy optimization. And again, PT GUI's gotten so good that it's almost always perfect, almost always. And I haven't had to use templates in years. Just doing it automatically like this works just fine. Rare occasion, it won't stitch together properly. Then I have to go in there and make the manual adjustments and such. But that's gotten to be very, very rare.
Yeah, I guess important point I should make is that because I've been doing this for a while, I know that I've got design fixation or workflow fixation, right? I know there's better ways of doing things. And I'd have to admit that I haven't looked at PT GUI's results for a long time. And if PT GUI can do the nadir patching, and I'm already running through PT GUI, then suggesting to doing it in Photoshop afterwards is not an efficient way to do it.
Mm.
So I need to, I should go back and look at that.
Yeah, there's all kinds of cool new tricks that have been added. So well worth it. Okay. Oh, another thing I forgot to mention, when I import my images into Lightroom, I have a preset that I have built personally for this lens camera combination that has many of the settings already applied, including noise reduction. So all of that is done automatically during the ingestion stage.